really belong here? Do I really belong here? When you look out in the room, you see everyone's different. But these days, it seems like it's our skin color or our place of origin that makes us different. Everyone comes from different cultures and different backgrounds, whether that's Indian, Chinese, Caucasian, you name it. And as a teen in my generation, having witnessed so many examples of racial profiling and discrimination and slurs, it starts to make me wonder, is it the environment that we're growing up in that affects the way that we grow and learn? Does it disable or enable our abilities to be able to work to be the next inclusive leaders? I'm Sophia Tingarella, and I'll be talking to you today about how racism affects the way that we grow and learn. As a kid, I never really thought about my skin color. I just thought I'm human, like everyone else. And it wasn't until late 2018 when I was walking to class and I overhear someone calling someone a curry girl and a terrorist. And it took me a minute or so to finally realize that I was that someone. Same thing that year, there was a video that circulated in our district of a few girls that were saying the N-word in a video and were repeatedly smiling and laughing about it. And I don't think this is limited to our little suburb. There have been many news reports of racial actions that never got the justice they deserved, such as 2020's incident with George Floyd that really kicked off the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, let's see how these behaviors are reflected onto our society. Based on observations I've had at my school and a couple conversations I've had with students, I see that we make course choices every year based on our preference to avoid these types of behaviors. You see an unnaturally high enrollment of immigrant and racially diverse children in STEM courses rather than being in sports where they can be exposed to this abusive behavior. So what are driving these behaviors? Why are people stereotypically in being more academically talented rather than being a sportsman? Especially starting at school age. Is the school teaching us this, or is it something else? It's pretty much every little thing in our environment that we grow up in that contribute to this. So how do we go about correcting this? Is it even right to think that diversity is good for us? If so, how do we work to become the next inclusive leaders? Let's start by analyzing the most popular organizations in the United States, like Microsoft, Google, NASA. They have 30 to 50% of minorities in their employees. And they're immensely successful, right? Because they make products and services that the world literally runs on. They seem to be a melting pot and seem to be thriving on it. So how do we do what they do? The key difference between these organizations and what they do that we as kids don't have access to is cultural training. Some type of cultural or inclusive training is required to work in these types of organizations. So how do we go about bringing that same cultural training into our youth and community? By making cultural training and education a mandate starting from childhood. Let's take a very typical incident that happens to most minority students, or even better, my own experience of being called a curry girl and a terrorist. The only true thing about that statement is that I'm a girl. Coming from an Indian family, I don't remotely belong to any ethnic or cultural group that has participated in terrorism. And my parents can attest to the fact that I don't even like curry. But, jokes aside, incidents like this lead me to believe that racial slurs are based on an inherited lack of awareness. So a past education system that worked for past generations probably isn't adequate for today's environment. And I propose that is one of the fundamental changes we need to make to our school curriculums. What if we introduced a core subject along with social studies called World Studies that created that awareness starting from a young age? What if we started celebrating cultural days in our schools like Diwali or Eid or Passover or Kwanzaa? I've heard about a show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that taught past generations of children great behavior. So what if we introduced a show called Mr. Rogers' World that had multiple hosts like Mr. Rogers or Mr. Khan or Mr. Patel that taught us all how to coexist? I'd like to conclude with my observation that rather than trying to correct people's behavior, we should try and give them that awareness so that it hopefully points them towards the direction of recognizing their fellow humans as fellow humans and not as someone who's inferior. This education inside the home and outside the home will create a generation that understands a world that doesn't eat or live or play like them, but still a world where everyone belongs. I'm Sophia Tingarella, and I'd like to conclude by asking you to play your role in making cultural training a part of you and your family's future. Thank you.